Hello and welcome. I'm Coach Lynne Edris, and I'm here to help you learn to live well with your ADD brain.
But today I have Linda Roggli with me, and in a moment we're going to talk about the difference in ADHD between men and women. So welcome, Linda. Please introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell our listeners a little bit about you, where they can learn more about you, all of that good stuff.
Oh, Lynn, thank you so much for having me on. Lynn and Linda, that's a pretty cool thing to have. It's double Lynn.
There you go.
Yeah. And thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. It rhymes with Roggli. That's what I always tell everybody. But you can find me at the ADDva network, which I founded, it's been in 2005, 2004, because
Wow.
I kept hearing about all the negative things about ADHD. And I would go to conferences and I would come out and I just want to fall into a puddle or something because it was all bad news. And I thought, surely I can't be that bad. So I decided to start looking for the positive things about ADHD for women. And, 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't much out there about women, to tell you the truth. So I decided to specialize in women with ADHD who are 40 and better, as I like to call them. Why did I do that, you ask? Because I was diagnosed when I was in my mid-40s, which was way long time ago. I'm embarrassed to say, but no, I'm happy to say, because it's nice to have that diagnosis and be able to continue to learn about it. Why did I get diagnosed in my mid-40s, however? That's the reason that I decided to focus on women with ADHD in that age group and beyond, because a lot of us are in perimenopause in that 10 years before actual menopause, which is the actual cessation of menses. It's when you have your last period, and who knows when that is, right? You just kind of, it's happening, and then it doesn't happen for a long time, and then it happens again, and I guess this wasn't the last one. But a lot of things for ADHD women are different from men because of estrogen and because of hormones. And in the perimenopausal phase, which is that, as I say, 10 years, it could be even start as early as 35. It could start as late as 55. Who knows when you go through menopause? Estrogen starts making very wide swings in our body. So we'll have a really, really big surge of estrogen, and we're feeling great because estrogen helps our ADHD brain. It helps those brain connections. It helps dopamine, to be very specific. And when we have more dopamine connections, stronger connections, our executive function is better, our attitude is better, our mood is better, et cetera, et cetera. However, during perimenopause, now keep in mind that we do this all the time when we're having our periods. Estrogen goes up, estrogen goes down, which is why a lot of us when we're having our regular cycles, or irregular in my case, our ADHD, if we know about it, ADHD is really pretty good right after our periods. And then we get closer and closer to that, place when we start the period itself, and estrogen goes away, and then our brains, kind of evaporate, if you will. Well, imagine that on a bigger scale at menopause in your mid 40s or late 40s. And so when I finally, my doctor said, well, let's just see if you are in menopause, let's check your hormones. Well, they put me on low dose birth control pills because I was having migraines, and oh my gosh, it helped my migraines so much. I had hormonally related migraines. It took me off the medication, and I was like, I couldn't rub two words together and make a sentence. My brain just died. So I finally, we can talk a little bit about that, but I finally realized that, oh yes, number one, yes, it is menopause. And that's when it became very clear that ADHD and estrogen and hormones are intimately related, much more so for women than they are for men. Why? Because men's hormones don't fluctuate like ours do.
Right.
Hormones stay pretty steady until they reach their 50s, and then they decline, but they decline slowly and at a pace that is not an up and down roller coaster
like ours can be. Absolutely. And I don't have to imagine it because I've also lived it. So I get it. There are lots of things I think that contribute to ADHD showing up differently and the experience being different for women than for men, including like social roles and social expectations. And a lot of the things that women, even in the year 2022, as we're recording this, are expected to be responsible for can be things that are really hard for a lot of us with ADHD, right? Maintaining social connections, all of that sort of organizational stuff that is required to maintain social relationships, to send gifts and cards and notes and remember birthdays and keep a home running, let alone a business and everything else. I mean, all of those kinds of things can be really difficult when you have ADHD. And then you throw hormones into the mix. and it becomes next level difficult at times.
Absolutely. I just interviewed Dr. Mary Salanta, who has done a lot of research with ADHD adults, and she says that ADHD for men and women, she specifically was talking about inattentive ADHD, and a lot of women are diagnosed with inattentive type ADHD. Or combined type, which also has inattentive as part of that mix. Right, so that almost covers all of us. And she said, inattentive symptoms in men and women are really the same, but they manifest very differently for women for exactly the reasons you talked about. And she kind of ticked off a lot of the, maintaining a home and the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not to denigrate any men who are also managing homes, et cetera, et cetera. But as you say, when you throw the hormone issue in there as well, it really becomes quite challenging. And therefore, I believe it was Dr. Patricia Quinn who said that women with ADHD are much more impaired. Oh, it might have been Dr. Ellen Littman, but they both agreed that women are far more impaired than men with ADHD symptoms, which is really kind of shocking when you think about it. And in addition, the only there's not research on women is scarce, frankly. It's beginning to increase a little bit, but one of my favorite researchers in the entire universe is Dr. Stephen Hinshaw, and he works out of Berkeley in California, and he has done the only, that I know of, only longitudinal study of girls starting when they were like in their 5 or 6 years old, and they are now in their 20 years later, they're in their late 20s. And what he's found out that not only are women more impaired, but they also tend to be, I'm sorry to say, trigger alert here, they also tend to attempt suicide more often. Yeah. They tend to have more issues with self-injury, mean cutting, burning, that kind of thing. So, and they have far more predilection toward eating disorders. And I'm not talking about just, oh, I'm really hungry, I eat a lot. Well, it can be obesity. There's certainly that piece, but there's also bulimia and anorexia and those kind of things. And, when I think about it, some of those things I just mentioned are about control. Yeah. And often I think that our interior lives are so chaotic that sometimes we feel like we need to control outside of them. Yes, I certainly have been accused, and I'm sure I have been. When I was going to therapy and no one knew it was ADHD, you're a very controlling person, you know that? Yeah, I know. What am I supposed to do about it? But now I know why. Right. And I also, but most importantly, Lynn, I have forgiven myself for those things that I didn't know what was going on with my ADHD. Yeah. I didn't know it was ADHD. It was like, duh, I could have had a V8, right? Well, it was just ADHD. And so when I look back, and I encourage all of your listeners to look back on your lives and say, oh yeah, it was ADHD. I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't being completely, irresponsible. I was actually not being disrespectful because I was late to a meeting. It was my ADHD. And now that I know, I can now decide whether I choose to change some of those things. And that's where I think I love the fact that you do so much with productivity and that you've got this handled, baby. I want you to tell me how to do it.
I don't know. I don't ever want people to think I'm perfect or I'm some robot out there who's got all this figured out. My husband could tell you for sure. Not always, right? But I know what works for me, and I know what I need to have in place to kind of perform at the level of my abilities more consistently. Not that I don't have my ADHD days, because I had a client years ago who said, some days, I always get my quotes wrong, some days aren't worth a pill, meaning some days no amount of medication is really going to be the thing that keeps ADHD at bay. Sometimes ADHD wins, but we want those days to be kind of the exception rather than the rule. And then they're not as impactful, and you don't beat yourself up as much because in general, you feel like you're doing okay. But it's not easy, right? And it's really not easy. I mean, one of the things you and I were chatting about before we started the recording is so many of us are suffering kind of in silence, behind the curtain, so to speak. I hear an awful lot of, clients that come to me will say, I feel like the wizard behind the curtain. I don't want anybody to see, what it takes for me to keep it together. Or I've had clients say, I don't want anybody to see how the sausage is really made, meaning what they have to do to show up the way that they are. But that means that we are suffering in silence, and we're suffering alone. And that is so painful when there are millions of us out here who are struggling as well. So finding the community that you can connect with. And now more than ever, I think that is so important for all of us.
Absolutely. And in some respects, the pandemic has been horrible. It is a nightmare. But in some respects, it has allowed more of us to get together because we don't have to physically be in the same space. It's become more normative for us to be able to be online, those of us who are lucky enough to have internet access, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really been wonderful. My ADHD support groups that were local and people had to come to the meeting, et cetera, now we're online. So now I have people coming from Canada and from the UK and from Colorado, and I'm in North Carolina. So in that respect, it's really been nice to be able to do that. And I will tell you that there had, back in the day when we still were meeting in person, there was a woman who came to the meeting, and I used to have kind of tiered seats, so taller ones in the back, and it was just an ordinary room, but I wanted people to be able to see. And she sat way in the back in one of the tall chairs and didn't say a single thing. And I go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. And you can probably understand that at the beginning, everyone says, I'm blah, 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 and this is blah, 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 so I'm from blah, blah, blah. And by the end, people are telling me their life story, right?
Right.
So the entire meeting becomes the introduction, which is okay because, as you say, we need to hear from each other.
Yes,
but this particular woman sat in the back, and it was her turn to introduce herself. And she started to cry before she said a word. And she said, I've belonged to this group now for 3.5 years. And this is the first time I've been here because I was too scared that everybody would think I was terrible. And it just broke my heart. And I never saw her again. She only came one time, but I do hope for her sake that she knew that it wasn't just her, that just being in a room and the energy of having other, and I have a group for women and I have a group for men and women, at least I used to. And just being in a group of other women and non-binary, I don't want to be exclusive here, people who really understand it, as you said before we got started, who get it, is so amazing. That's one of the reasons that's another reason that I really wanted to start the ADDva network, because I wanted to talk to other women. Like, I was going through menopause and I was irritable as heck. I was like, I fired my dentist on the phone. I was like, you can't change my appointment. Well, fine, I'm fired. You know, I was just like, the fuse was like 1 inch long. And I thought, I don't know other women who are going through this. No, and nor do I know other people who are going through ADHD. So I wanted to be able to talk to both of them. When I went to a conference, Sari Solden, the great ADHD, popularizer of women's ADHD 25 years ago, was leading it was one of those 3-hour sessions, and there was breakouts, right? So we were in a little session by ourselves, and we had 15 minutes to talk to each other. And I got out of there and I was so hungry for more. I just wanted more of it. Could we please just spend the whole day in the breakout session? Because I needed it so much. And now I hear from women again and again and again and again who say, one woman sent me an email and she said, ADHD is my dirty little secret. Yeah. And that makes me sad too.
It makes me sad too.
Yeah, well, and another one said, we're a lot of fun, but we're a handful.
Yeah, no kidding there, right? Absolutely. So making part of who you are your dirty little secret is sad, right? That's we want you to accept who you are and to, be nice to you and to be able to share all of you, with the world and, warts and all, right? I mean, it's not easy. I'm not saying, that this is an easy journey, but it's an important journey. So finding that community to connect with. And I don't know if this is a good time to jump into it, but you have a series of events throughout the course of the year that bring, kind of that sense of community. One of them is coming up and starting very shortly this time of year, the ADHD Women's Palooza, which you can learn more about at www.ADHDevents.com/Palooza. But tell us a little bit about the Palooza, how you started it, all of that good stuff.
Well, I had wanted since the very beginning of jumping into the ADHD arena, if you will, because there was so little out there. There was Sari Solden, there was Terry Matlin. Those were the only 2 books about women's ADHD, period. That was it. And my vision was to create an ADHD only women's conference. And for some reason I had in my vision board that I'd created, it was going to happen in Brazil. I don't know why,
but sounds like fun, right?
Exactly. But because ADHD is not limited here, it's international, it is worldwide. Absolutely. And probably universe wide. Who knows out there with extraterrestrials? We don't know. But the point is that I really have always yearned for that, and yet it can be very dangerous because after 9/11, you probably all remember, there was the drop in attendance at live conferences was dramatic. Yeah. And when I put myself out there and I'm renting a block of rooms, then I'm the one that has to pay for that. And frankly, in those days, my cash flow was not strong enough to absorb any kind of loss. Even now, it's not to that kind of loss. But I thought, well, maybe we can do it online. And I talked about it, I thought about it. And finally, I approached Terry Matlin, who had written one of the 2 books about ADHD women. And I said, you want to do this? And she said, I think that would be a great idea. So I knew that Terry knew people I didn't know and vice versa. So we created it together. And it was both Janine and I, my assistant, probably put in 125 hours each the week of Palooza week because we were trying to do it live and we were trying to send it at certain times. And one of them, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm still editing it. It's not uploaded. What are we doing? It was craziness. But I was so thrilled. We had a couple of thousand people who showed up, and we were so thrilled about that because it was so much work. And we did it again the next year, and more people showed up, and we did it again the next year. Terry decided it was a little too much work for her. So she said, I just would rather be one of the presenters. You can take on, the rest of it. And I said, that's great. We've been doing that part anyway. So now we're in our 7th year.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, I can't believe that it's been that many years. Of course, it was wonderful during the pandemic because people were all online. So we jumped up to almost 10,000 people. 10,000
wow.
joined us. So it's a huge event, and we were determined from the beginning to bring in the cream of the crop experts, the people who've done the original research. So Dr. Stephen Hinshaw, whom I mentioned earlier, is on the Palooza again this year. Dr. Mary Salanto is in the Palooza. Sari Solden is on the Palooza. Dr. Ned Hallowell is part of the Palooza. And some names that you may not recognize. Oh, and I just need to tell you that the reason I was talking to Mary Salanto was because we were talking about inattention. So we're going to have a session about inattentive ADHD, which is really important to women like us. But I also want to go a little deeper. So I wanted to get we're not talking about medication and set and treatment this year. I have a huge library because I've got 6 years of archives. Yeah. So if you want to hear something about medication, we've got the top experts about medication, and it'll cost you maybe $10 to buy it. And you can just buy one session. We have 26 or 27 sessions this year, and we release 5 at a time during each day of the week, Monday through Friday. And you can listen to them free for however long it is. I forget how long it is, but you can buy them. Of course, it's all that kind of stuff. But the most important, I wanted to mention a couple of things. We're talking about things that are unique, like mind mapping, for instance. Yeah. We're talking about mind mapping. We're also talking about ADHD can throw a wrench into writing. So we have
absolutely.
We have a writing coach who's talking about how to get started, how to finish things. We have some really, and somebody's even talking about the intersection of chronic illness and ADHD. So we have I try really, really hard to not only get great people, but also to have unique and compelling topics. And kind of circling back around, because I know we're running out of time here, and circling back around to what you have made such an important point about connection.
Yeah,
I think that the most important thing, and I demanded this, I said, Terry, this is the absolute thing we are going to do no matter what. We have a live event on Saturday so women can talk to each other. And to me, we can have all the experts in the world, but more often than not, we need their information, don't get me wrong, but more often than not, we are our own experts for each other and for us. So that's what we do. We call it the Pink Ticket Party, and it's from 12 to noon. That's Eastern time. And you can join it. That costs just a little bit extra, but frankly, a lot of the women who show up have never really had a conversation with another ADHD woman that they think that they know of.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but everybody's hiding behind this mask, right? Of, oh,
Absolutely.
I'm fine. Don't look behind the
Right.
curtain.
Exactly.
So I'm proud as anything to be able to continue to bring this to the world. And we also have the ADHD Parents Palooza in the summer, and we have the ADHD Couples Palooza in the fall. So we're going to have paloozas everywhere. I have the ADHD Carrot Palooza. We'll have the ADHD. We're just going. But I just thank you for letting me mention that here, because it really is. Oh, by the way, it starts the 14th of March. So
Okay.
so it's that week. And Lynne was part of it last year. She's probably going to be part of it next year. I try to do a combination of people every year. So
absolutely. We can't all do everything all the time. Absolutely.
And and thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your session in January. That was amazing too. So thank you. You just do such good work in the world. Thank you for that.
Right back at you. I mean, I think having that community for people to connect and to not feel alone and to not feel, I mean, I know you hear these things. I hear these things all the time. I know I feel like a freak. I feel like nobody understands me, and that breaks my heart, because there are millions of us out there struggling with the same things, men, women, and everything, all people from all over the world, all walks of life, all different backgrounds, all ages, struggling and feeling alone. And you don't need to feel alone. Finding people that you can connect with, finding people that you can be really present with and be yourself with it's so important.
It's amazing. Thank you for that.
So important. So you can learn more about the Palooza at www.ADHDevents.com/Palooza. But you were going to share, we talked a little bit about, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but you talked a little bit about standards of ADHD presence.
Yeah, when I trained as a coach, which has been in the early 2000s, I went through a program that was based on positivity, and it really changed my life. And one of the pieces that they used was a 10-step program that was called the Standards of Presence. And they read it every single day during my training, every single day. So it became kind of in my body. And now I've adapted it to couples. I've adapted it in relationships. I've adapted it to ADHD women, and I use it at my retreats. I use it often, even in my organizing classes. I use it so that people really have the standards of presence. And of course, for us in a group, the first one is, of course, confidentiality. But it's also having a beginner's mind, which I know I didn't mention to you earlier, but that's number 2, is having a beginner's mind. So even if you've heard any of this before, you've never heard it on this day, at this age, wearing the clothes you have on today, sitting in the seat you're sitting in. So that means you've never really heard it at all. So imagine opening yourself up to new information in every moment and having a beginner's mind. And another one of those 10 that I really appreciate is claim your experience as your own, meaning, like, for instance, I think a lot of ADHD folks like to give each other advice. Oh, I know how to fix that. Let me just tell you how to fix that. Well, people don't like being told what to do, especially ADHD people don't like being told, don't boss me around.
You're not the boss of me, right?
Exactly. So what claiming your experience for yourself is saying, this is what worked for me. And it may have some help. You may find some tidbits in there, but it's kind of like a 12-step program. You take what you need, you take what works, and you leave the rest. And I really, really, really appreciate that. And I also make sure that people say, this is me, because I'm sure that you've heard a lot of people say, well, everybody does this, and you do that, and you do this. No, that's not true. You're speaking it. It's true for you. Right, so it takes a long time at my retreats for people to say, oh yeah, I did that. But it's dangerous to say I, because it kind of puts you out there on the limb, because what if nobody else is around and nobody else feels that way? But the truth is that I think is one path towards something we talked about earlier, of being authentic. And I think ADHD folks really yearn to be authentic. I want to, let me just speak for myself. I want to be appreciated and honored for who I am in the world without covering it up, without putting that facade on. And in order to do that, I can be comfortable saying this is true for me. It happens so often in relationships that people are like, we're mind reading each other. No, we just speak our own truth, and that's enough.
Absolutely. That's huge, right? We all want to be seen and heard and appreciated for who we are. I think that's a basic human need. And I think it's something that we really all deserve as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Good idea. Good way to end.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope our listeners have found this helpful. I really appreciate you being here, Linda. I know you're about to get crazy busy if you aren't already.
I think both of those things are true.
All of the above, lots of times. Absolutely here too. You can learn more about the Palooza at www.ADHDevents/Palooza. Linda has great events, all different kinds of the year, not just for women. Guys, you can learn something from the Palooza as well, about yourself and about the women around you as well. There's good stuff in there for everybody. So I really appreciate you being here, Linda. I appreciate all our listeners, and I appreciate your time and your attention as always. Thanks again, Linda, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening. This is Lynne Edris, Productivity and ADHD Coach with ADDvantages.com, helping you get your performance in sync with your potential.